Ethan's stomach growled as he stared at the menu board inside the campus cafe. His fingers gripped the crumpled $5 bill in his pocket, the last of his money until his next paycheck. Rent was due in a few days, and his textbooks had drained most of his savings. He sighed, scanning the cheapest meal options. As he stepped toward the cashier, a rustling sound outside caught his attention. Just beyond the glass doors, a frail, homeless man sat against the cold brick wall, clutching his stomach as if in pain. His tattered coat barely shielded him from the evening chill. Ethan hesitated. He barely had enough for himself, but something in the man's eyes, a mixture of exhaustion and quiet dignity, made his heart ache. Without overthinking, he turned away from the cashier, walked toward the sandwich fridge, and grabbed an extra one. "Hey, man," Ethan said softly as he approached the man outside. "Here, I got you something." The man looked up, startled. His eyes widened in disbelief as he took the sandwich with trembling hands. "God bless you, son," he murmured. Ethan forced a smile, ignoring his own hunger. "Take care," he said before walking away, shoving his hands into his empty pockets and wondering how he was going to make it through the week. Little did he know that single act of kindness would set off a chain of events that would change his life forever. Ethan walked back toward his dorm, his stomach growling louder with every step. He had spent his last few dollars on the sandwich, and now he wasn't sure when he'd get his next meal. But somehow, he felt lighter. Giving had eased a burden he hadn't realized he was carrying. By the time he reached his tiny dorm room, his roommate Jake was already sprawled on his bed, scrolling through his phone. The scent of instant noodles filled the room, making Ethan's hunger even worse. "Dude, you good?" Jake asked, noticing Ethan's tired expression. "Yeah, just a long day," Ethan replied, dropping onto his bed. He debated telling Jake about what happened, but figured it wouldn't matter. His phone buzzed. A notification popped up from his university's financial aid office. His stomach twisted as he opened the email, expecting another reminder about his overdue tuition. Instead, his eyes widened in shock. "Dear Ethan Carter, we are pleased to inform you that you have been selected as a finalist for the prestigious Horizon Scholarship. Please attend the interview session tomorrow at 10 a.m. Ethan sat up straight. The Horizon Scholarship? That was one of the biggest awards at his university. Full tuition, living expenses, and even a stipend. But how? He never even applied for it. "Bro, what's up?" Jake asked, noticing his reaction. Ethan handed him the phone, still trying to process what he was seeing. Jake's jaw dropped. "Dude, this is huge. How did this happen?" Ethan shook his head. "I have no idea." What he didn't know was that his life was already in motion towards something far greater than he ever imagined. Ethan barely slept that night. His mind raced with questions. How did he become a finalist for a scholarship he never applied for? Who put his name in the running? And most importantly, did he even have a chance of winning? By morning, his nerves were through the roof. He dressed in his best clothes, a slightly wrinkled button-up and the only decent pair of slacks he owned. Taking a deep breath, he made his way to the university's administration building, where the interview was scheduled. The waiting room was filled with other students, most of them dressed in crisp suits or elegant dresses. Ethan felt painfully out of place. After what felt like an eternity, his name was finally called. He stepped into a large, polished conference room where three distinguished-looking individuals sat behind a long table. One of them, an elderly man with silver hair and sharp eyes, studied Ethan closely. "Mr. Carter, thank you for coming," said the woman in the middle. "Do you know why you're here?" Ethan hesitated. "To be honest, ma'am, I was surprised to get the email. I never applied for this scholarship." The panel exchanged knowing glances. The older man leaned forward, folding his hands together. Tell me, Ethan, do you believe in karma? Ethan blinked, confused. I guess. I mean, I believe that doing good things comes back to you. The man smiled. Interesting, because that's exactly how you ended up here. Ethan's pulse quickened. I don't understand. The man opened a folder and pulled out a photograph. Ethan's heart nearly stopped. It was the homeless man he had given the sandwich to. His breath caught in his throat. What does this mean? The elderly man's expression softened. That homeless man is my brother. Ethan's mind spun. He had no idea that his small act of kindness had been witnessed by someone who had the power to change his life forever. Ethan's breath hitched as he stared at the photograph. His mind scrambled to piece everything together. The older man continued, his voice calm yet firm. My brother Robert used to be a successful businessman, but life took a cruel turn and he lost everything: his family, his home, his career. He lived on the streets for years, and most people ignored him, but not you. Ethan swallowed hard, his hands gripping the chair's armrests. I just gave him a sandwich. It wasn't a big deal. The woman in the middle smiled. That's where you're wrong, Ethan. It was a very big deal. The older man nodded. Robert was in a bad place that day. Worse than usual. He was losing hope. Then you came along, and instead of looking past him like everyone else, you showed kindness. You treated him like a person. That moment meant more to him than you'll ever know. Ethan felt a lump form in his throat. He had never expected something so simple to have such an impact. The man continued. After that, Robert reached out to me. We hadn't spoken in years. He told me about you. He said that a young man, someone struggling himself, had chosen to help him, despite having so little. That made me realize something. Ethan waited, his heart pounding. The man smiled. You're exactly the kind of person we want to support. We created this scholarship for students who not only excel academically, but also possess good character. Robert convinced me to consider you, and when I read about your financial situation, I knew he was right. Ethan's hands trembled. Are you saying? The woman in the middle nodded. Congratulations, Ethan. You've been awarded a full-ride scholarship. Tuition, books, housing, everything is covered. For a moment, the room was silent. Ethan sat frozen, his brain struggling to process the words. A full scholarship? His biggest dream, the one he had nearly given up on, was now a reality. Tears welled in his eyes. I don't know what to say. The older man chuckled. Then don't say anything. Just promise us one thing. Keep paying it forward. Ethan wiped at his eyes and nodded. I will. I swear I will. He left the interview room in a daze, his heart overflowing with gratitude. One simple act of kindness had changed his life in ways he never imagined. And he knew one thing for sure: he would never stop spreading kindness, because what goes around truly does come around. Months later, Ethan stood in front of a crowded auditorium, dressed in his graduation cap and gown. The weight of his journey rested on his shoulders, but it no longer felt heavy. It felt empowering. As he stepped up to the podium, the audience fell silent. He took a deep breath and looked out at the faces before him, his professors, classmates, and, in the front row, the scholarship committee. Among them sat Robert, the homeless man he had once bought a sandwich for. Except now, Robert was different. He had cleaned up, found stable housing, and even started working at a local outreach center, helping others who had once been in his shoes. Ethan cleared his throat and began. Not too long ago, I thought my dreams were out of reach. I worked long hours, struggled to afford tuition, and doubted whether I'd ever make it. But one moment changed everything. A small act of kindness, a sandwich I bought for a stranger. The audience listened intently. What I didn't realize then was that kindness isn't just about the moment. It creates ripples. That stranger turned out to be connected to the very people who made my education possible. And today, I stand before you, a college graduate, not just because of my hard work, but because of a simple choice to help someone in need. Ethan glanced at Robert, who gave him an encouraging nod. And now, I want to keep that cycle going. He smiled. After graduation, I'll be joining a non-profit organization that helps struggling students stay in school, just like I almost couldn't. Because what goes around comes around. And I want to make sure that kindness keeps coming around, again and again. The auditorium erupted into applause, and as Ethan stepped down from the podium, he felt something deep inside him, a certainty that his journey had only just begun.